Not everything forgotten is dead. There are things that do not exist in books whose names are no longer etched on stone tablets and whose songs are no longer sung in ancient rituals, yet they still exist like a silent stream flowing beneath the world's surface. Beneath the vast sands of sunken civilizations buried within geological layers unnamed by history, there echoes a whisper that cannot be heard by the ears but only felt through the deepest frequencies of the soul. It is the reverberation of a memory that never vanished. The memory of a god who sought no throne, who desired no worship, but who wished only for one thing: that memory would remain alive. In an age when gods fought for dominion, when the stronger began to rewrite sacred laws and stamp seals onto fragmented truths, only one remained silent. Not out of fear, not out of defeat, but because he knew victory in the game of power is never true victory. Enki, god of water, of life, of wisdom, saw what others had forgotten, that power can be overthrown. Dynasties can fall, but memory cannot be erased if it is hidden the right way. If something within you trembles when you gaze upon ancient ruins, if you've ever felt that you knew something you were never taught, if you've ever heard a call with no sound, then perhaps you're not just watching a video. You're beginning to resonate with the frequency Enki sowed thousands of years ago. Subscribe to this channel if your heart skips a beat, not for any reason, but because your soul has just been touched. Leave a comment with the number 8, not to prove you understand, but to affirm to your own soul that you once knew, and now you're beginning to remember. When the Anunnaki Council declared a new order, when Marduk, his own son, chose to stand with the new gods, Enki did not argue. He did not try to retain the ME through force, nor did he attempt to salvage a system already decayed. Instead, he withdrew, but not to vanish, rather to do the unthinkable, to encode knowledge into the very structure of the world. With no one left to teach, Enki began to rewrite the language of memory, not with letters, but with stone. Not with speech, but with forms. Not with stories, but with resonance. He built structures not to be worshipped, but to be protected. Each brick, each spiral, each geometric formation was a silent incantation waiting to be activated, not by ritual, but by the vibrational frequency of souls who still remember. And he knew a time would come when all had been erased, when even his name was forgotten, that someone would stand before the ancient ruins, someone who had never studied the old myths but who heard something in the silence and felt their heart skip a beat. That person would not need to understand, only to remember. Because Enki did not leave behind a religion, he left behind a memory map written in stone, sealed beneath the sand. After Marduk's betrayal and the cold consolidation of power by the Anunnaki Council, Enki held no more illusions. An era had ended. Souls that once resonated with the source, that once vibrated in harmony with the stars, were now labeled as outdated, dangerous even. Sacred knowledge, the kind that once lifted humanity from the mud and connected worlds through vibration and light, was now condemned as heresy. It was no longer preserved. It was hunted, seized, encrypted, or worse, destroyed without a trace. The ME, those resonance tablets that encoded the original blueprint of the universe, were no longer seen as whispers of the cosmos, but as instruments of manipulation. Enki had seen it coming long before it happened. He was not blind. He had witnessed every sacred frequency being replaced with command, every gentle light strangled by form and punishment. He had watched Marduk, his own son, bearer of his blood, rise to stand among the new gods, not for wisdom, but for power. And when Enki looked into his eyes, he did not see rebellion. He saw forgetfulness. And forgetfulness, he knew, is the deepest form of betrayal. He understood he could not save everything. He could not stand in the floodwaters of a dying age shouting, "Remember," but he could do one thing: hide. Hide, not like a treasure is hidden, but like a seed is planted, awaiting a season of awakening beyond the grasp of time. And so he began a nameless journey. No more council, no more authority, no more crown. Only him, a solitary memory craftsman wandering across the realms of Earth, carrying the last unbroken frequencies, seeking places where they might endure, untouched by time. Knowledge was no longer protected by law, so he sealed it in stone. He knew structures would outlive language. He understood that not all understanding must be spoken, some truths must be felt through bone, through blood, through soul. So instead of scriptures or sacred texts, Enki inscribed memory through form, proportion, resonance, and placement. He built structures that could only be read by those who resonated at the right frequency, not with their eyes, but with their inner vibration. In every place he passed, he left a mark not to be known, but to be reactivated when the time was right. A stone placed precisely could emit a sound only the remembering could hear. A curve in the architecture could channel resonance directly into the unconscious. A spiral etched into a stone gate could unlock memories buried in human genes for tens of thousands of years. No one understood what he was doing. Even the souls still loyal to the light could not keep pace with a god who was erasing himself from history by becoming space itself. Every structure, every sacred geometry Enki left behind was a piece of him. Not like a creation, but like a fragment of his soul. And he accepted that for memory to live, he must be forgotten. Because if they remembered who he was, they would destroy what he left. But if they only saw those works as unsolved mysteries, they wouldn't destroy them, they would search, and in the searching, they would begin to remember themselves. When he placed the final stone at the gate of Giza, when he drew the last spiral within the heart of Eridu, when he left the final symbol atop the Tower of Babylon, Enki did not pray. He did not cry. He simply stood in silence as if listening, to see whether the frequency was still deep enough to survive across the millennia. And then no one saw him again. There was no farewell, no legend that remained whole, only the ancient structures, and modern souls, sometimes unknowingly still searching for something they cannot name. Perhaps that something is still resonating beneath the sand. Perhaps Enki never truly left. On a moonless night when the sky was but a sealed black dome, Enki stood alone before a wasteland, a place where ancient currents once flowed like divine lifeblood, now reduced to cold stone and dead sand. He did not cry, nor pray, nor rage. He made a vow not in words, but in a layer of meaning beyond language itself. If they reject the light, I will embed its fragments in stone. If they shatter the written word, I will let frequency speak in its place. And thus began a pilgrimage not for the gods, but for memory. No more councils to address, no more followers to convince, no more grand rituals in sacred temples. Enki was alone, a bearer of the memory of stars, the resonance of cosmic cycles, and the solitude of one who did not choose to fight with swords, but with silent vibration. His journey was not toward the heavens, nor into glory like the other gods longed for. Enki went downward deep into the earth, into the fractures of stone, into fault lines that still echoed with the voices of the beginning. He moved like a sower of seeds, not seeking fertile soil, but seeking where memory could still breathe even within stone. At each place he paused, it was not to conquer, but to listen. He pressed his ear to mountain fissures, to the nameless walls of ancient temples, to the subterranean flows of hidden energy. And when he heard the right resonance, he left behind a code, a spiral carved in silence, a stone placed off-axis by 1 degrees to channel an underground wave, a room with no door. Yet echoing the sound of a human heart when someone stepped into the correct position. He needed no one to understand. He only needed knowledge not to be lost, for he knew nothing lasts forever in words. But if carved into form, form does not lie. If sent through frequency, frequency will always find its match. And so he etched silent songs into space. In what was once Eridu, he transformed ruins into a resonance map. In the deserts of Kemet, he raised 3 stone peaks to guard the light axis that links Orion to the human soul. In the land between 2 rivers, he left behind a ziggurat, a musical note rising to the sky, but one that must be sung from the heart. None of his structures were built to be glorified. All were vaults of encoded memory waiting for a being of the right frequency to unlock them. Not with a key, but with resonance. Some would later call them pyramids, gateways to the gods, or remnants of a golden age. But they do not know Enki did not build for glory, he built for the future. For a time when human souls would be silent enough to once again hear the call with no sound. Because for him, teaching was no longer possible. But evoking through intuition, through architecture, through resonance was still a door left open. And in every stone, in every hollow dome, in every spiral hidden beneath a fading moonlight, was the wordless resolve of a god who was forgotten but never departed. Enki did not write history. He let memory sleep in the structure of the world like an ancient subterranean current waiting for time to strike the right rhythm, to rise again. Not through war, but through an unexplainable remembrance, and that to him was the only true form of victory. Enki returned to where it all began, Eridu, the first city designed not merely for living, but to resonate with the cosmos. But this time he did not return as the god who gifted knowledge to mankind, but as the guardian of the remnants of an era that had been condemned. Here he did not speak, he did not teach, he buried. The final, intact, Those sacred fragments of frequency, those cosmic memories encoded in light and vibration, were wrapped in silence and buried beneath stone, not as relics but as seeds for a season of awakening that had not yet come. But Enki did not only hide. He rebuilt Eridu not as a city, but as a map of cosmic frequency. Every wall was placed not for beauty but to align with the breath of the earth. Every curve in the corridor, every fissure in the stone floor, every seemingly meaningless gap was an activation code waiting for the right soul to step into resonance and awaken it. He left no instructions, no markings, for those attuned to the frequency would feel it. When they stepped into the precise convergence point, they would hear the sound of invisible water flowing through stone, feel the pulse of vibration deep within the foundation like an ancient heart beating slowly beneath the earth. And those who stepped off course would see only rubble dust and silence. To the outside world, Eridu was ruins, but to Enki it was the first gate encoded to open through soul resonance. No ceremony was held, no monument bore his name. He left the place like a vanished shadow, leaving behind a city blindfolded from the world. And he smiled not from satisfaction, but because he knew the most sacred things must be hidden so deeply that they can no longer be called by name. Beneath layers of stone, Enki left a resonance chamber where no sound from outside could enter, but where the sound from within rose like the heartbeat of the ancestors. Some would later call it the Earth's pulse center, a convergence of ley lines, but they did not know that Enki had drawn the energy map before humanity had learned to measure time. He knew someone would one day return, not a scholar, not an archaeologist, but a soul who remembers without knowing why. They would not seek the ME to study it, but to reconnect with something that had always pulsed softly in their blood. That is why he did not just hide the ME in stone, he embedded them in the resonant structure of space itself. There are those who, standing in an empty chamber of Eridu, suddenly feel tears fall without reason, an emotion without a name, a wave passing through their chest, an ancient melody rising unheard by all but them. Enki left no prophecy, but he left vibrational locks set to open only when one bearing the original frequency returns. Not before, not after. Not by logic, but by resonance. And so Eridu will sleep until the earth is quiet enough and a soul still enough steps inside. Then the stone will vibrate again. The sand will whisper once more. And the ME will not appear as artifact, but as a living memory awakened from within the one who touches it. Enki never needed his name restored, for he knew those who find the right frequency will not need names. They will need only one thing to feel that a part of their soul still lives somewhere within the silent stone walls of Eridu. Enki knew words could be censored, scripts could be burned, symbols could be redefined, but sacred geometry could not be distorted. It belonged to no single language, was bound by no culture, obeyed no throne. It was a primordial voice, silent, existing before the first star ever lit the cosmos. And so Enki chose geometry and resonance as his final medium to deliver the unspeakable. He did not build temples. He carved no proclamations. Instead, he began crafting living spaces with consciousness frequency machines disguised as ancient architecture. To him, each structure was a fossilized symphony, each stone block a note, each void a rest, the entire form a score that needed no instrument to play. The golden ratio 1.618 was not just for aesthetic beauty. It was a fundamental frequency of life, the resonance that everything from leaves to DNA echoed in. He used it as the backbone of every design. But more than that, Enki mapped acoustic nodes, reflected waves and spiraling chambers, like energetic veins for the non-material flow. When a living being stepped into such a space, even if they knew nothing, their body would feel it. Their nervous system would realign, their heart would shift rhythm. Their brainwaves would brush against a layer of resonance their ancestors once knew, but had long forgotten. He called it the language of ancestral blood. No one needed to translate it, no one needed to study it, because it bypassed the mind and went straight into the bloodstream. It awakened memory not through meaning but through state, a state so familiar that the soul did not resist but simply fell into it as if returning home after an age of wandering. Enki once experimented with open spaces, stone circles, crescent arcs, converging energy lines. But he soon realized for knowledge to survive millennia, it must be encoded not only in form, but in resonance. So he began designing resonance chambers, spaces where even the faintest sound reverberated like a voice from the beginning of time. Each footstep, each breath, each gesture within them triggered a subtle response. To the unaware, they were just stone, But to one carrying a memory vein, it would feel like someone had just touched a forgotten memory they didn't know they carried. The spirals that Enki left from the stone walls of Eridu to the ancient gates in the Andes were not decorations. They were coiled frequency maps, each loop aligned with a vibrational tier, a state of awakening. Those who grew quiet enough to perceive would begin to hear something, not a sound but a subtle hum across their entire being, like a string inside them had just been plucked. He did not design for beauty, he did not design for permanence, he designed for activation. And that activation would not arrive immediately. It could sleep for thousands of years waiting for the right one, the right frequency, the right moment. That is why some enter an ancient ruin and feel nothing, but others standing between broken walls suddenly weep without reason. They do not understand. But they know at some deep layer their soul has just been called by a language it never learned. Enki never sought praise. He desired only one thing, that someday those who carry the resonance code would find these structures not to admire but to remember themselves. And when that happens, knowledge will not need to be spoken. It will awaken like a wave, quiet, deep, but unstoppable. Enki arrived in Kemet, a land that humanity would one day call Egypt. But in that time, it was simply a sacred expanse, still echoing with the harmonies of the stars. This was not a place he came to bless. It was the place he chose to open a gate. Not a physical one, but a subtle link between Earth and the celestial realms. Here, Enki sought out the last descendants who still carried the original frequency souls that were half human, half starlight, still in tune with the vibration of their origin. To them, he did not teach with words. He transmitted knowledge through brainwaves, geometry, and intuition. And in silence, they began to raise 3 pyramids, 3 planetary resonance pillars, 3 anchors for the memory currents that flowed between worlds. Giza was not a tomb. Those who built it were not slaves, and those who designed it were not thinking of death. On the contrary, Giza was a living machine. Calculated to the millimeter, each stone was chosen not merely for its strength or weight, but for its vibration. Some stones resonated at 432 Hz, a frequency called the heartbeat of the universe. Some corridors were tuned to the natural hum of the earth. Enki understood only when space and vibration merged could sacred memory be preserved for millennia. Inside the Great Pyramid, he left rooms that seemed meaningless to the uninitiated. But to him, they were pure resonance chambers, free from excess matter, so sound and human frequency could oscillate at precise amplitudes. In the King's Chamber, Enki designed a hidden energy axis that connected directly to Orion, the constellation of the original creator gods. Whoever stood at the right point of resonance, whoever breathed in rhythm with the structure itself, would activate an invisible bridge between body and sky. No one knows why that room lacks decoration, or why its ventilation shafts point toward the stars. But Enki knew this was how lost souls still carrying the origin code could call home, not to escape Earth, but to remember why they came here. Giza does not speak, it does not tell stories, but it vibrates. It vibrates like an instrument long asleep. And all it takes is for one soul to touch the right string, and the song will play, not through the ears, but through the blood. Later generations would call it a pyramid, a tomb, a symbol of power. But they do not know Enki did not leave behind power. He left behind a device to reactivate planetary memory, awaiting the day when Earth would once again resonate with the heavens, and those carrying the ancient codes would be awakened not through logic, but through an unexpected tremor in the heart. That is why those who enter Giza should not ask, "What is here?" but instead, "Why do I feel moved when I stand in the middle of that silent chamber?" Because if you hear something without sound, if you feel a heartbeat that is not your own, then perhaps you've just come back into resonance with the soul you lost across the millennia. That is when the pyramid ceases to be stone and becomes a mirror reflecting cosmic memory. And Enki, though erased from the scrolls, is still watching from afar, not to be worshipped, but simply to know the frequency has begun to hum again. People enter Giza expecting to find fossilized power, solid gold, royal mummies, or at the very least a remnant that affirms humanity's greatness in history. But when they lay their hands on the smooth stone walls, when they encounter the eerie silence of the chambers, no incense, no statues, no carvings, they grow disappointed. What they do not realize is this: the silence itself is the language. The absence of material offerings is the signal. Because Enki did not design Giza to be admired but to be felt, not through the eyes but through the blood, not through logic but through resonance. The empty rooms inside the pyramid are not empty. They contain something deeper than sound frequencies encoded in stone. They are living resonance chambers where the air does not simply carry waves, it stirs memory. Each granite block was chosen not for hardness alone, but for its ability to reflect the body's vibrations. Each corridor was not measured in meters, but in the rhythm of the soul. When you enter the king's chamber or the queen's chamber, you are not stepping into physical space, you are entering a resonant time gate programmed not to respond to mechanism, but to vibrational code. Breathe in sync, stand on the right axis, hold the right silence, and you may hear something, not from outside, but rising from within you. A whisper echoing through stone, pulling images. You've never seen, stories you've never read, emotions you've never learned. This is sacred memory, activated from within. Enki knew sacred truth need not be shouted. It only needs to touch the right frequency and it will resonate on its own. The empty rooms of Giza are not relics. They are instruments for awakening the bloodstream of the soul. Those who resonate will feel their blood shift, their heart skip. As if someone just touched a stream of memory sealed tens of thousands of years ago. Not everyone will hear it. And that was Enki's intention. By removing everything that might trick the mind into thinking it understands, he protected the frequency from being systemized. He did not want it decoded. He wanted people to become the vibration itself. That is why Giza does not speak in words. It tells no story in carvings or inscriptions. It waits for someone to enter and suddenly find themselves unable to name what they feel. An inner emptiness long without words begins to hum. And at that moment, Giza opens, not by mechanics, not by religion, but by memory that never died. Many archaeologists scoff at this emptiness, but a few, just a few, have returned with stories of feeling breathless inside rooms where the air was full, of sensing someone watching from inside the walls, of leaving Giza and dreaming of languages they never knew, stars they had never seen. And perhaps that is what Enki already knew. The right ones will remember, not through knowledge, but through resonance. In the end, Giza is not a record of history, it is an activator of living memory. And each silent room is a symphony of stillness waiting to be played not by an instrument, but by a heart still carrying the original frequency. Enki is no longer there, but his vibration is still waiting. In Mesopotamia, where two rivers once flowed as the lifeblood of the first civilization, Enki left behind a different kind of design, not to be worshipped, but to be remembered. It was the ziggurat, a tiered tower not merely built to reach the heavens, but to pull the soul layers back toward earth. For Enki, the tower was not a symbol of power, but a vibrational structure, a place where the divine and the human realms could intertwine. At the highest summit of the ziggurat, Enki established a resonance point where layers of frequency overlapped like bands of acoustic spirals. He called it Babylu, the gate of the gods. But not everyone who stepped into it could see the gate. To the unaware, it was nothing more than a massive stone block, heavy, silent, empty. But to those who carried the right frequency, the gate would open not through mechanics, but through the tremor of memory. Some believed Babylu was a passage to ascend into the heavens, but Enki did not build it to go up. He built it to go inward into the self, into the deep strata where the soul still carried the original acoustic code of its home planet. And when one stood in the right place, no longer guided by logic, but resting in profound inner stillness, they would feel an invisible current rising from the stone to the heart. Not water in the physical sense, but a wave of memory, warm and hauntingly familiar, so real it could move one to tears without knowing why. The ziggurat did not tell stories through symbols. It held no jewels, no treasure hidden behind myth. What Enki hid within could not be grasped by hands only touched by the soul. It was a message of spirit transmitted through resonance, written into the slope of its stairs, into the falling angle of afternoon light, into stone alignments placed to match the earth's breath. Each level of the ziggurat represented a frequency layer. The higher one climbed, the quieter the surroundings became, not because the air thinned, but because the energy began to filter itself. Those who were still burdened by attachments, by worldly intentions, would feel tired, breathless, dizzy, but those aligned would feel lighter. Not in body, but in soul weight, as if part of their being had slipped beyond time, returning to a vibration older than language itself. Enki never needed this to be understood. He only needed this: that one day someone would hear the sound of their own heartbeat echo between the wind-laced tears of the ziggurat, a rhythm not entirely of the flesh, a frequency not coming through the ears, but a feeling as if they had stood here long before they were born. And when that happens, Babylu opens, not by door, but by remembrance that transcends meaning. Later, kings built temples beside the ziggurat, believing proximity brought them closer to the heavens. But they did not know Enki had sealed that layer of frequency. Only those who bore the ancient code, who had once walked among the Orion nebulae, who still carried unspoken memory from the source, could reawaken the resonance Enki buried within. And so, to the world, the ziggurat is ruins. But to resonant souls, it is a sacred transmission chamber, where whispers are not spoken but vibrated. Enki did not build to be remembered, he built to activate. And when the right one comes, not to study, but because they've been called the ziggurat, will hum again like a colossal instrument, whose sound is not heard outwardly, but awakens from within. Enki did not journey alone. Though he walked in silence, hiding knowledge in stone and vanishing from the scrolls of history, he left behind the codekeepers. Not soldiers, not priests, but souls designed to remember in humanity's place. They wore no crowns. They made no declarations. They simply existed like hidden currents of the cosmos, rooted within early civilizations, living as ordinary people, while carrying within them a frequency code that had never been switched on. Enki did not program them with language. Language is too easily distorted. He encoded them through intuition, empathy, and resonance. They did not preach morals. They did not explain the ME. They simply looked a gaze so deep that it made the other feel as though every veil had been lifted. They touched a touch that didn't convey information but triggered a sensation that one had once known something, once been someone, but could not name it. In sleep, they dreamed of symbols they'd never learned: spirals, spheres, gates of light. They heard melodies that repeated like lullabies from a world no one speaks of. And though they could not explain it, they held onto these dreams as sacred signals in a world drowned in noise. Some lived hidden lives as artists, scribes, or healers. Some reincarnated as children who saw what adults dismissed as delusion. Others were branded strange, pushed to the margins because they heard things no one else heard, knew things no one had taught. But Enki knew they did not need to be understood. They only needed to continue living until the time came. When the right one steps into a codekeeper's energy field, nothing happens on the outside. But within, a resonance layer begins to awaken. Not a conversation, but an activation. No explanation required. Just a silence deep enough, and the soul of the other will begin to tremble in recognition. Enki once said, "What I hid in stone, they will find with their eyes. But what I hid in blood, only the codekeepers will perceive." No one can identify a codekeeper by clothing or signs. They wear no insignia, they perform no rituals, but they arrive at the right time in the right space with the right inner state. They are mirrors of resonance. If you meet them before you are ready, you will see only a stranger. But if you've begun to remember something deeper than thought, you will feel as if you've just reunited with a fragment of your soul in their eyes. And when resonance happens, there is no flash of light, no miracle, only a stillness so profound that you finally hear something inside you, something that has been whispering for a very long time, but you were never quiet enough to listen. That is the moment the codekeeper fulfills their role, not with words, not with action, but with presence. A presence tuned to the precise frequency, like a second string vibrating when the first is struck. Enki left behind no sect, but he left behind people. And when these people meet, even if they do not know each other's names, they will recognize one thing. We once walked the same corridor of light. We once heard that wordless song, and now that song is returning. Enki left the south carrying with him the last resonance codes and journeyed to a land that at the time had no name, a place where magnetic veins ran deep beneath the earth like rivers of memory still asleep. Today we call this place Turkey. But to Enki, it was a sacred intersection on the planetary frequency map, a spatial chord where the earth was ready to listen. Here he did not build temples. He wrote no scriptures. He composed a song not with sound, but with stone, Gobekli Tepe. The modern name is only a shell for a structure that does not belong to time. There Enki raised towering stone pillars, circular, roofless, stripped bare as if the sky itself was the ceiling and the earth the altar. On each pillar he engraved images not meant to tell a story, tigers, foxes, snakes, birds, suns, spirals. Later generations would endlessly debate their meanings, religion, astronomy, fertility symbols, but they did not realize these were musical notations. Each pillar was a note of resonance positioned not only by the circle's circumference, but at the crossroads of acoustics and magnetism. When you step inside the circle, you don't hear music through your ears. Your blood begins to hum. A primal rhythm awakens, wordless, tuneless, yet eerily familiar. Enki called it non-sonic communication. Each creature carved into the stone did not represent a concept, but a layer of life. When humans resonate correctly, they no longer stand in the present. They return to a primordial soul state where all life still remembered where it came from. In that state, knowledge does not need to be taught. It is already encoded in the blood. Enki did not teach. He awakened. And the strange thing is, it was humanity itself who buried Gobekli Tepe carefully, methodically, as if performing a ritual, not to destroy, but to preserve. As if on some level deeper than language, they understood this place was not meant for their time. It was a message to the future, a seed waiting for the soul to mature enough to unearth its own memory. No inscription remains to explain why Gobekli Tepe was entombed. But the layers of soil bear no scars of war or violence. Everything was covered by hand, like the final pause of a sacred composition. A silent rest lasting 12,000 years, awaiting someone who knew how to read rhythm to strike the chord again. And just as Enki had foreseen, it has returned. Not discovered by treasure seekers, but by souls drawn to it by an unexplained pull. Some unearthed it out of curiosity, but others standing among the stones wept, not for the architecture, but because their heart had just remembered a song without melody, a song that once echoed through the blood of their ancestors. Gobekli Tepe is not the oldest temple. It is the first song ever written in stone, and like all sacred songs, it was never meant to be performed. It was meant to be felt. Enki never asked for anything to be built upon it. He only needed someone to enter still enough, deep enough, true enough. And when they do, they will realize they are not listening to an ancient song. They are the song resonating from within. Enki went farther still. Across deserts beyond oceans, he journeyed toward a land where mountains kissed the sky and layers of space seemed to weave into each other, the ancient West. In the place now called the Andes, Enki chose a dimensional intersection where space no longer followed linear rules and time began to breathe out of sync. Here he did not build towers, he carved no inscriptions. Instead, he cut stone not to construct but to open. Aramu Muru, the modern name, is only a shell, a cover for a structure not aligned with conventional architecture. A stone gate, tall, flat, frameless, hingeless, as if someone had sliced through the mountain with a technology not yet known to humankind. But Enki used no tool, he used frequency. Each slab of stone was joined with such precision that no blade could slip through, no hammer mark could be found, no gap existed. These were not simply constructions, they were the physical crystallizations of a frequency code. Each surface, each contour was how Enki encoded soul into stone. There is no door to open, no mechanism to turn, but the gate responds to consciousness. When one arrives with the right heartbeat, the right breath, rhythm, the correct attunement to the earth's vibration. At this spot, they do not pass through stone. The stone simply ceases to resist. No one knows how it happens. There is no flash of light, no material change, only a moment when the soul slips out of time. Enki called it the threshold of timelessness, a point where past, present, and future do not stand in line, but blend into one resonance. And when someone stands before Aramu Muru, they are not meant to ask, "Where am I?" but rather, "Who am I in this memory stream?" Those who came after misunderstood. They attached all manner of legends to Aramu Muru, from Viracocha's hallway to an alien portal, but no one could say for sure. Because no technology explains how those massive stones align like the reflex of two resonant souls. No modern tool can measure the resonance Enki encoded because it doesn't emanate from the surface. It pulses from within reality itself. Some say that standing near the gate they hear murmuring echoes with no source. Others feel their bodies become weightless as if gravity had been suspended. Some, after placing their hands upon the stone, return home with dreams of places they've never been, memories not belonging to this life. Such stories are dismissed as fantasy, but Enki knew this would happen. Only those who touch the right layer of soul can cross the timeless threshold without losing their essence. Because Aramu Muru was never meant to take you elsewhere. It is an interface between matter and frequency, a place you don't traverse with your feet but slide into through vibration. And to do that, you cannot bring ambition, identity, or belief. You can carry only one thing, the deepest purity within your soul. Enki left this gate not to be discovered, but to be reunited with. No one holds the key. But when you resonate enough, you are the key. That is why no legend can say for certain where Aramu Muru leads. Because each soul, when stepping through, enters a different layer, not by coordinates, but by the memory that is ready to be awakened. And like all things Enki left behind, Aramu Muru does not shine. But it resonates. And those quiet enough to listen will find that the stone is singing not a song for the ears, but for the soul that once flew through gates not of this world. Enki did not hide only on land. He understood that stone can be shattered, temples can fall, mountains can be worn down. But water remembers everything, not as a storage vault, but as a breathing layer of memory. Water does not record through form, it dissolves frequency, blending memory into its depths, making it impossible to sever, only to feel. Beneath the sea, where light no longer defines the boundary between real and unreal, Enki hid the final fragments of memory. Not in the form of me, not in geometry, but as dispersed vibrations like unnamed sounds still waiting to be heard. There among coral reefs, yet unborn beneath fractured stone terraces, each sealed resonance was hidden, not to be discovered but to be remembered through the most primal state of the soul, intuition. Places once called Lemuria, Atlantis, or unnamed sunken cities were once intersections of consciousness and frequency. Enki did not build them as monuments, but as floating resonance stations on the waters of awakening. When planetary cycles began to drift out of phase, when the will of other gods turned memory into sin, Enki submerged these cities not to flee, but to protect what could no longer remain above ground. These cities cannot be found on maps, but they appear in dreams, especially in the dreams of children's souls newly returned to the material world, unclouded by logic or systems. They speak of underwater palaces of soft light glowing beneath the waves, of voiceless calls echoing in their ears while swimming in a lake. Adults call it imagination. But Enki knows these are feedback signals from unsevered depths. Whoever has gazed into deep water without fear, whoever has been entranced by a shimmering light with no clear source, whoever has felt that the ocean floor is speaking not in words but in frequency, may in fact be hearing the echo of Enki. In places across the world, deep-sea divers have told stories of feeling watched or of hearing songs from below the abyss. No recorder has captured those tones. No tracker has pinpointed those sights. Yet the experience remains profound, silent, haunting, like a piece of memory with no beginning. Enki knew time would erase everything humanity tried to preserve through power, but what was hidden in the current would live. Because water does not block, water carries. And one day, when souls are still enough, open enough, true enough, they will begin to hear the echo of the lost cities, not through sound waves, but through the resonance in their own blood. In the ocean's deepest places, there are structures no radar can detect, but dreams can. There are sunken stone gates collapsed like unconscious thoughts that still lead to other dimensions if the mind aligns with the right code. And there are currents that do not flow by gravity but by memory. When a soul enters those waters, it is not the body that floats but the self that slips from the timeline. Enki does not need anyone to recover what has been buried. He only needs this, that when the time comes and humanity is ready, not to search with logic but to listen with the deepest layer of the heart. Then water, the messenger that never betrays, will begin to open what was once sealed, not to be understood, but to be lived again. When all the placements were complete, from Eridu to Giza, from the Babylonian ziggurat to Aramu Muru, from Gobekli Tepe to the deep seabeds of memory, Enki quietly vanished from history. No farewell was spoken, no farewell rites were held, no statue bore his face, no temple etched his name in gold, and that was his choice. Because Enki understood what few dared to accept: anything carved into stone can be chiseled away. Any story written into history can be rewritten by those in power, but that which is never recorded cannot be distorted. That which lives in blood, in veins, in the mysterious layer of memory that needs no language is what truly endures. Enki never needed to be worshipped. A god does not require a throne. He sought no monument, no lineage chanting his name. Instead, he poured himself into space. Each structure was a piece of him. Each resonance point a fragment of soul left embedded in earth. And each person who enters the right vibration will not need to know his name, but will feel as though they are meeting a part of themselves. Enki knew his age had been sealed off by betrayal control and fear of free knowledge. But he did not resist, because he knew every system eventually collapses. The answer was not to destroy it in war, but to plant a seed of knowing not in books but in the blood of those yet to come. He called them the rememberers. They do not know who they are, they do not know what they carry, but they feel. And at the appointed time when ancient frequencies begin to resonate once more, when the planet shifts into a new cycle and the buried Emmy stir from dormancy, these people will activate. No teachers, no doctrine, no roadmap. They will remember not with the mind, but with a nameless emotion. A strange longing guiding them to places they've never been, stirring awe for images they've never seen, and causing their hearts to skip before an ancient stone no one else notices. That is the sign of return, not of Enki, but of the frequency he once sowed. Some will search for him in ancient texts, in relics, in theories, but they will not find him, because Enki erased his footprints from history's maps and left them instead on the soul's cartography. And only when the right one touches the right point at the right moment will resonance begin. Not with thunder, not with miracles, but with a subtle shiver, a strange dream, a deep feeling that I have known this for a very long time. That is why Enki's disappearance is not an end. It is the way he protected memory from corruption. He left behind no philosophy. He left behind living vibration in shape, in sound, and silence. And when the noise of this age finally subsides, someone in a moment of absolute stillness will hear it. Not his voice, but the voice of their own soul resonating from a memory that never died. And when that happens, Enki will not return as a god in the clouds. He will return in the breath of the rememberers, not to be glorified, but to reawaken the sacred that was once buried but never lost. If you've ever felt that you knew something no one ever taught you, if you've ever heard a call that made no sound, just a skipped heartbeat, a subtle shiver when touching an ancient symbol, a dream you couldn't explain but felt so familiar it brought you to tears, then perhaps you are resonating once again with Enki's frequency, not through logic but through a memory deep in your blood where no system can ever reach. Leave a comment with the number 8, not to prove anything to anyone but to affirm to your own soul that you once knew and now you are beginning to remember. And if something inside you trembles, not because of reason, but because something deeper has just been awakened, don't forget to subscribe, because in the next episode you will be guided to the gate of resonance, where the boundary between body and soul dissolves, between sound and light, between time and remembrance. It is not a gate to walk through, it is a frequency to return to. We will not go forward with our eyes, we will go by resonance,